Hi, my name is Yve Shepherd. I'm here to present my final project for EDSP-176. Baseline data is collecting information through assessment and observation using qualitative and quantitative measurements, used initially to see the level of a patient's ability, but also used to verify progress towards goals. In the MCL observation, baseline data was not directly seen, but it did appear to me that Tammy was collecting data during the auditory processing activity because she was marking things on a piece of paper as she administered a therapy. However, in 112, Paul facilitated a deeper conversation on the importance of collecting baseline data so clinicians can determine the patient's needs and see what services they qualify for. So as you can see on the right side of the slide, I have an image from Paul's slide. I really love this slide because it shows the scope of services a patient may require from an SLP, which makes it very important to collect baseline data to narrow down possible deficits based on concrete facts so that as clinicians, we can provide relevant therapy. Chapter 18 and 28. Additionally, baseline data plays an essential role in developing appropriate and objective goals for our client. Even though clinicians and observations did not share any written goals, it was clear they were being actualized. For example, SLP Tammy explained Mark was working on auditory processing skill, which is a component of the goal. As learned in class 112, short-term goals must include one behavior, one or more conditions, and one criterion. Later, Tammy did an activity that focused on auditory processing skills, where Mark had to tap a pencil on the table every time he heard a number that was 3 more than the number prior. The goal for this could have been written, client will tap a pencil on the table with 80% of accuracy during the auditory processing activity. So to add on to this, the book actually explains the same model is used when writing the O section in the clinician soap notes, which stands for objective. However, instead, the objective focuses on the performance that occurred. So in this case, I might write for the O section, client tap pencil on the table with 70% accuracy, given 7 out of 10 trials during the auditory processing activity. So instead of will tap, it says tapped. That shows the goal is what we hope to accomplish in the future, whereas the objective in the SOAP notes is what we actually accomplish in the session. This allows the clinician to track progress over a period of time because SOAP notes are written after every session. I plan to use this 3-part model for client goals and objectives in SOAP notes so that I can target specific deficits, but also target the progress. Chapter 15, organization of session, also known as the routine. This helps the patient feel comfortable because they are able to anticipate what will come next. This was seen with Susie and Abigail when they set a clock for 50 minutes and then the clinician made a list of what the activities we're going to do in order throughout the session. Abigail seemed comfortable transitioning from activity to activity. It was very smooth because she knew what to expect. So for me, I want to do the same thing. I want to keep the same strategy because I think it will work to alleviate anxiety in patients diagnosed with ASD because transitions can sometimes be problematic for that population, but also other children as well, and adults as well too. Chapter 27. In this chapter, I plan to focus on generalization. I thought it was really cool that Abigail made an effort to showcase her ability to say the R sound during a casual conversation with Susie. This is a perfect example of generalization, which is when a patient is able to use a practice skill without any prompting in a more natural real-life situation, basically in general, across multiple situations. In child communication disorder class, Professor Lamb explains that our ultimate goal as a practitioner is for our clients to master generalization of a taught skill. To me, once a patient generalizes a skill, aspects of their quality of life will improve as well, which I cannot wait to observe in my own practice. Chapter 21. Speaker dominance. Speaker dominance is who is speaking the most during the session. This can be varied depending on many factors. For example, during Susie's session, the communication ratio was clinician 60% and patient 40%. Abigail needed modeling frequently to learn and practice verbal skills throughout the session. In contrast, in 120, Professor Lamb taught us that when working with selective mutism students, it would be unethical to force, punish, or bribe the child to speak because of the disorder is connected to anxiety. Therefore, the speaker dominance would look more like 100% clinician and 0% patient. Even though each example is significantly different, they would both be appropriate to meet this patient's goals and needs. Chapter 22. There is both positive and negative reinforcement discussed in the book. However, I plan to talk about positive reinforcement, which is when a clinician provides feedback verbally or using objects in a way that rewards the client for their performance. This isn't seen in all the videos. However, the one I found most compelling was the video with Tammy Cook. When working with adults, it would be inappropriate to give out stickers and toys. Tammy still gave verbal praise, but it was in a way that felt natural and respectful to Mark's age and identity. When Mark struggled with an activity, she showed empathy mixed with praise, and during breaks, she steered conversation based on his interest. I could actually see the positive influence it had on him, working as a very powerful motivator. This helped me realize how important it is to consider not only the person's age, but culture when deciding what to choose for reinforcement. Chapter 20. That being said, the same is true for the materials a clinician uses in therapy. However, the book expands on evaluating the client's physical and mental abilities and skills, as well as the portability, the cost, and time of the material. So when observing Bob's video, he used a lot of different materials. All the toys were used effectively. They were very efficient because they could be used in small increments of time, which was really good for Cole because it was hard for him to engage for long periods of time. So this was a perfect tool. Many of these were very perfect for just play. However, in 273, Oral Rehab, Professor Noakes explains that cochlear implant therapy often involves or includes materials that target a variety of frequencies and sounds so the client can learn to sharpen auditory discrimination skills. In both cases, some of the materials may look very similar or may even be the same, but that is when working with children, but they're being used very differently to target that child's specific goal. So in both situations, it can be very appropriate, some of these materials. Chapters 17 and 26, ethical behaviors, involves putting the welfare of the child, or the client, I should say, at the heart and the center of everything. Even though Bob seemed like a kind clinician, there were a few instances I questioned his behavior. Towards the end of the session, he picked the child up and initiated a hug. The child's response was discomfort. The reason I'm pointing this out is that Bob's intentions were good, but disrespected the physical boundaries of the child. He could have given the child room to exit independently without encroaching on Cole's personal space. By observing this, I plan to examine my actions, even when I have my best intentions, to make sure I'm holding the code of ethics underlined by ASHA. HIPAA, which protects the client's privacy by making it illegal for a clinician to share any medical information with anyone other than the ones approved by the client. This was not directly discussed in any of the observations, but I do know that in order to share these observation videos, a clinician and perhaps even the master clinician needed to obtain verbal and physical permission directly from the client or the client's legal guardian. This is discussed pretty thoroughly in 112. Paul gave many scenarios where the students needed to identify how HIPAA was being violated. One in particular that stood out to me was there was two clinicians at a party and they were basically having conversations about the client in very casually gossiping about the client. I feel very strongly that this was inappropriate. I think, I must say, I find it upholding HIPAA very serious because I want my patients to feel safe. When treating somebody, they share a lot of personal information, which needs to be protected and honored. And additionally, I feel like it is a major important that I make sure that anything that they share is also secured behind a locked cabinet or in a safe space. I feel super duper big about that because I have my own learning disability and I find it very important to keep that in my own private discretion.